Ever wonder what betrayal actually tastes like? For me, that night, it tasted like the sharp, metallic tang of kitchen shears and the sickeningly sweet finish of the wine my mother forced me to drink. That glass of wine wasn't an act of love. It was a trap. I woke up in the middle of the night in my New York apartment. A chill like a strip of ice crawling from my neck down my spine. This eerie hollowness radiated from the back of my head like a piece of my body had been stolen in the silence. The room was dim, but I could still smell it, that faint, bitter scent of cold steel. The smell of my mother's kitchen. It's the smell of a betrayal already served. My hands trembled as I reached for my neck. And then I felt them thick, silky strands of hair. My only heirloom, the last bit of strength I had left, now scattered across my pillow like the shredded remains of a soul. I lunged for the mirror. Glass doesn't lie. It reflected a distorted, broken figure, my hair hacked into jagged clumps, and a hollow white gap where half of my left eyebrow used to be. A surgical strike meant to mock my very identity. What they didn't know was that in the corner of the room, a tiny camera I'd hidden out of a gut feeling that my privacy was being invaded had captured everything. This wasn't just a break-in. This was a massacre of trust executed by the people I called family, but they were wrong. They thought cutting my hair meant cutting my voice. They had no clue. They just recorded the evidence of their own downfall. I had grown that hair for 8 years. It was my armor. Now, it was a malicious mess. Uneven clumps hung there, lifeless, destroyed by pure contempt. But seeing my eyebrows sliced off that clumsy, jagged half-circle made my face look deformed. Like a glitch in a human form. This wasn't a bad haircut. This was a hit job on a woman's self-worth. It was a declaration of war. I scanned the room, desperate for a reason. An intruder. Some freak through the window. Then the truth hit me right on my vanity desk. My mother's kitchen shears were sitting there, perfectly neat. It's the same shears she used to cut meat and open packages. Next to them was a note in her familiar handwriting, cold as ice. Short hair will make you look more modest. Tomorrow is Sophia's day. Don't mess this up. Signed, Mom. A cheap scarf sat on the chair, a pathetic gift to cover up her crime. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there for a few seconds, feeling like every sound in the world had been sucked into a black hole. Then my knees gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching those dead locks of hair as if I could hold on to. The dignity they stripped from me while I was drugged on that wine. The sweet, terrifying taste of it still lingered on my tongue. I could hear was the phantom snip of steel sliding against my skin. I sat on that cold floor, my hair tangled between my fingers like dead worms. A laugh escaped my throat dry, cold, sounding like a stranger's voice. It echoed through the empty room, answering the question I had dodged my whole life. Sometimes. The people you call family are the ones who want you to disappear the most. If they thought cutting my hair would silence me, they picked the wrong girl. This isn't going to be a story about a girl buried in the shadows. This is the start of something none of them saw coming. My name is Olivia. I'm 25, an accountant at a small firm in New York. If there's one thing I learned faster than any of my peers in this city, it's this. Justice doesn't exist in a toxic family. I grew up in a house of 4, but the spotlight only ever hit 3, my parents, and my sister Sophia. Sophia was always the golden child, untouchable. Since she was a kid, Sophia had those look-at-me eyes and an arrogance that bordered on cruel. Every time we had guests at our place in the Hamptons, my mom would parade her around like a piece of fine jewelry. She's doing ballet. She's top of her French class. She'd gush. Me, even though I graduated with honors, taught myself to cook, to help the family, and worked my tail off to send money home every month. I was left in the dark. I was left in the kitchen washing crystal glasses or doing her homework in my room. Most days I wondered if I was a daughter or just unpaid help. If anyone bothered to ask about me, my mother would just give a flat smile and say, "Olivia is a good girl. Never causes any trouble. Didn't cause trouble, but nobody remembered. I existed. Either I was the background child, the one who complied, who stepped back, who vanished so Sophia could shine. While Sophia had expensive dance lessons from age 5, I taught myself accounting and finance from old books I borrowed from the public library. I actually believed that if I worked hard enough, one day I'd be loved. While Sophia had a closet full of designer labels, I wore hand-me-downs from my cousins. Never complained. Yet, at family gatherings, my mother would just look at me with those vacant eyes and say, "Your long hair is a bit much, dear. Cut it short so you can focus on your work instead of your looks." Once I got a promotion notice at work. Her father just glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but keep it quiet. Sophia is depressed because she just got dumped. Don't make her feel overshadowed." I remember that breakup clearly. The whole family dropped everything. Mom ordered pizza, Dad opened wine, and the night turned into a candlelit pity party for her. Me, I sat silently in the corner studying for my exams. Not a single person asked me a thing. Back in 11th grade, Sophia was chosen as a model for a teen magazine. My mom invited every relative over to brag about that cover photo. They blew up a poster and hung it in the middle of the living room like a monument. Me. In those long, lonely nights, I used to wonder if this long hair was the only thing I truly owned that nobody could take away until tonight, when even that was stolen. But they were wrong. They thought cutting off my past would make me crumble. They don't know that tonight I found the ultimate weapon to turn Sophia's high society Manhattan engagement. The thing they stole from my stage for my first act of revenge. I'd installed a tiny security camera in my room months ago just because I suspected someone had stolen my grandmother's heirloom bracelet. I never expected that lens would capture a truth far more horrific than a simple theft. Sophia's engagement in Manhattan. It was the moment I'd waited for all year. Not because I wanted to compete, but because I'd bought a high-end silk dress with my own hard-earned accounting salary. I'd taken care of myself, believing this would be the first time I'd walk into a crowd not as someone's shadow. The first time I didn't need permission to exist. I was just going to be me. I'd imagined that day 100 times. I'd arrive early, smiling, greeting relatives. I'd walk confidently with my long, meticulously cared-for hair, the last keepsake from my grandmother, as a silent declaration that I, too, deserved to be seen. I thought if I did well enough, if I looked decent and elegant, then maybe, just maybe, my parents would look at me with pride. But they didn't see me that way. They saw me as a threat, as if just by daring to be beautiful, I would steal Sophia's glow. I used to believe parents' love was unconditional, that no matter how quiet or different you were, they'd love you just because you were theirs. But that night, sitting on that cold floor, clutching hair cut by the very people who brought me into this world, I realized a bitter truth. My mother didn't just want Sophia to shine. She wanted me to know that no matter how hard I tried, I'd always be the shadow. Maybe because she was once someone's shadow too, and now she's just continuing the cycle. And my father. He didn't hold the shears, but his silence, look away every time I needed validation, made him the perfect accomplice to that cruelty. Not everyone who gives you life wants to see you shine. Sometimes they just want you to stay small, to vanish, so another child can glow without the burden of your presence, even if you're their own blood. And the cruelest part? I'd accepted that until tonight. The night a part of me was severed, not by scissors, but by a betrayal disguised as family love. The smell of that Shiraz wine is still heavy in my mind, reminding me of the sweet treachery I drank until the last drop. And since that fateful night, I understood that if I wanted to protect my worth, I had to stand up myself. No more waiting for vague validation, no more suffering in silence. That night, the house in the Hamptons was unnervingly quiet. No loud music from Sophia's room, no TV echoing from the living room. Not even the familiar clinking of dishes as Mom cleaned up. There was only the warm yellow light from the kitchen and a strange scent in the air. Herbal, but with a sharp, heavy sweetness, totally different from the ginger tea I usually drink to warm up after a long day of crunching numbers. I was about to go to bed when Mom walked in, carrying a classic porcelain cup with a faded rose pattern. She smiled gently, a smile missing her usual sharp judgmental edge. "Drink this, Olivia. Shiraz. The good stuff. It'll help you relax and sleep deeper. Sophia's engagement is tomorrow. You need to look refreshed." I was a bit surprised. Mom never proactively brought me drinks, never cared if I was tossing and turning from work stress. But the way she handed me the cup with such strange naturalness made me feel petty for refusing. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually part of the family portrait, even if just a blurry background color. I took a sip. The wine was sweeter than usual, a cloying sweetness that flagged the crushed sleeping pills mixed inside, leaving a dry sensation in my throat. But at the time, I was too exhausted to question a rare moment of kindness. I drained the cup, set it on the table, and told myself never to question my mother's generosity again. When I finally opened my eyes, the Manhattan skyline was still draped in that pre-dawn gray, but something was dead wrong. My entire body felt heavy, like I was crawling out of some bottomless, dreamless black hole. My neck felt ice cold. There was this terrifying emptiness at the back of my head, a void I'd never felt in my entire life. I reached up. There was nothing there. I bolted upright, lunged for the mirror. And a sound came out of my throat that didn't even sound human. It was a jagged, choked sob. My hair, the waist-length hair I'd spent nearly a decade caring for with every ounce of patience I had, was gone. It had been hacked off. Jagged, uneven clumps were missing, sliced away while I was drugged and defenseless. But it got worse. When I looked closer, I saw my left eyebrow had been shaved off in a messy, mocking stroke. My face looked distorted, broken. It was a direct surgical strike on my identity. I stared at myself and didn't recognize the woman in the glass. My scream echoed through the silent house, but no one came. No doors opened. No one asked if I was okay. Stumbled downstairs, and there she was. It's my mother, sitting calmly at the dining table, slowly stirring her coffee. She looked at me over the rim of her steaming cup with zero surprise. No guilt. Just this heavy, suffocating silence, as if I were the one being rude for speaking too loudly while Sophia was still sleeping. "It's just hair, Olivia," she said, her voice as flat as if I'd just chipped a nail. "You need to focus on supporting your sister. Stop making everything about you and your looks." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father, still in his pajamas, sat at the other end of the table, eyes glued to the Wall Street Journal. He didn't even look up. He just dropped one sentence, cold enough to turn my blood to ice. "Don't ruin this. Sophia needs a perfect day. No distractions." I was the distraction. I stood there in the middle of that kitchen with a ruined head and a soul that felt like it had shattered inside my ribs. It wasn't even anger. It was worse. It was a hollow, echoing emptiness. Even though I was dying inside, I forced myself to move. I went back to my room, hacked the remaining mess into a choppy bob, wrapped an old scarf around my neck to hide the damage, and used a brow pencil to fill in the gap on my face. I decided right then I was going to that engagement party in Manhattan. At the party, as I felt the relatives whispering and snickering at my quirky new look, and saw Sophia's smug, triumphant grin in her designer gown, I didn't fight back. Not yet. When Sophia raised her glass for the toast, I stood up, my voice trembling just enough. "I wish you all the happiness you deserve." But right before I walked out, I leaned in and whispered to my mother, just loud enough for the guests nearby to catch it. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for finally showing me exactly where I stand." The moment her face went pale and the murmurs started, I knew the seed was planted. This wasn't the revenge. This was just the prologue for what was coming at the Hamptons. I walked out in silence, pulled my phone from my hoodie, and hit record. I started documenting everything: the snide comments from aunts, the malicious gossip in the corners, every word, every careless remark, every look of contempt I used to wonder if I was just too sensitive about. Started sending photos of my butchered hair to a few trusted relatives with a gentle explanation of the truth. A silent wave of doubt began to ripple through the family tree. Now I knew for sure it wasn't my imagination. They literally wanted me erased from the family portrait because I might look better than Sophia on her big day. I got back to my room, locked the door, sat on the floor, and started digging through every piece of evidence I'd quietly collected, especially the footage from that mini security camera. It was clear as day. My parents creeping into my room with kitchen shears in their hands, watching my own mother glide those blades through my hair like I was an enemy. A cold current of electricity surged through me. That was the moment my last shred of respect turned to ashdot. Old comments started looping in my head. Olivia needs to learn her place. Don't let her post photos with Sophia. She makes everything look cheap. It's with that long hair. She just overshadowed her sister. I used to think those were just bad jokes. But when you piece the puzzle together, it's a vivid picture of calculated favoritism and emotional gaslighting disguised as family love. Sitting there in the dim morning light, with my hair scattered around my feet, I knew this wasn't just about a haircut anymore. This was about my life, my worth. I picked up my phone and called Sarah at 6 a.m. Sarah was our old housekeeper, fired because she dared to stand up for me against Sophia's tantrums. Sarah, I need you. It's time to tell the truth. 20 minutes later, Sarah was at my door. When she saw my shredded hair, she froze for a second. Then she walked in, closed the door softly, and put a hand on my shoulder. I showed her the note my mother left. I showed her the security footage. My mother's voice on an old recording came through, cold as a winter morning. Just cut it. That hair makes her think she actually has value. Sarah looked me dead in the eye. We are not staying silent. Not this time. We sat on the bedroom floor and started mapping it out. Step 1, the look. Sarah took me to a high-end, hidden gem of a salon in Soho. Marcus, the stylist there, leaned in and whispered, "You didn't lose your hair, honey. You're just stepping into a much more powerful version of yourself." In less than an hour, my hair was transformed into a sharp, modern bob that hugged my jawline. But I made one thing very clear to Marcus: do not hide the eyebrow. I wanted. It exposed a jagged scar of the brutality I'd endured. I needed it to be undeniable, living proof in front of every high society guest. Next came the strategy. Sarah and I decided that tonight's engagement party in Manhattan wasn't the endgame. I was going to show up looking off with the hacked hair and the ruined brow just to let them gloat in their own cruelty. I wanted them to think they'd won. But in reality, I was there to collect the final receipts of their true nature. We backed up every recording and video onto 3 encrypted USB drives. Sarah suggested a double twist for the actual wedding in the Hamptons. A few months away, that's where the real revenge would go down, involving a pair of clippers and a very large screen. I picked out a sharp white suit, keeping it as minimal as possible to make my mutilated face the star of the show. Sarah looked at me and said, "You don't need to outshine anyone, Olivia. You just need to show up so they can see exactly what they did to you." Before we left, Sarah started checking in with our most influential aunts, casually dropping photos of my butchered hair into their inboxes. Just in case someone tries to scrub the crime scene, she winked. I just smiled. By nightfall, the trap was set. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. At the engagement party tonight, I'd let my mother believe she'd won right until I whispered in her ear, thanking her for showing me my place. That was the prologue to their nightmare in the Hamptons. The party was held in a 5-star ballroom in Manhattan. Think soaring ceilings, gold leaf everywhere, and tables draped in white silk. It was a sea of high society elites, shimmering gowns, soft classical music. I walked in, and at first, nobody recognized me. I was just another girl in a sleek white suit with a look in her eyes that was way too calm. My hair was sharp, but that missing eyebrow. I asked Marcus not to touch it. I wanted to look slightly off, slightly unnatural, just to draw every judgmental eye in the room. As I walked down the hall, the whispers started. I could hear the muffled snickers behind. Silk fans and wine glasses. They thought I was a freak. I walked past the family's VIP table. My mother was center stage in a stunning wine-red gown, looking flawless. But the second our eyes locked, her lips went thin. That fake smile died instantly. Her face turned ghost white, as she realized I actually had the nerve to show up with a face she'd ruined. Sophia gave me this smug smirk, the kind that says, "You've lost, sis. Now swallow your pride and go sit in the corner." She had no idea. None of them did. I wasn't there to be the background. I was there to measure their cruelty one last time. Before the hammer dropped, then the MC called me up. "Please welcome Olivia, the bride-to-be sister, for a toast." I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit me like a physical weight. Under those harsh lights, the jagged hair and the missing brow were impossible to miss. The murmurs turned into a roar. What happened to her? Is that ... a style choice? My mother stared at the floor, pretending to be the concerned parent while avoiding the judgmental stares of her elite friends. I stood there, the mic trembling slightly in my hand. Started with the script they expected. Partners, friends, and family ... Tonight is about love. It's about celebrating Sophia's next chapter. A few polite, confused claps followed. I let out a soft smile and paused. I didn't play the tapes. I didn't show the video. Not yet. Sarah and I agreed. The Hamptons is where this story ends. I looked directly at Sophia, then at my mother. My voice was steady but laced with poison. I only hope my sister continues to shine as bright as the priority this family has always given her. Sometimes for one person to glow, another has to accept being stripped of everything they hold dear. The room went dead silent. They didn't fully get it, but they felt the ice in the air. I walked off the stage through a sea of frozen faces. As I passed my mother, I leaned down, smiled coldly, and whispered loud enough for the guests next to her to hear. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for reminding me of my place. But your real gift. You, Dad, and Sophia will get that in the Hamptons when this family finally gets unmasked." My mother's face went translucent. The glass in her hand started to shake. Sophia's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high, even with the scars of their betrayal all over my face. The second I hit the lobby, I checked my phone. The photos of my butchered hair and my mother's cold-hearted note had already been blasted to the most powerful matriarchs in our circle. Sarah had also leaked the audio clips to a few high-end society bloggers. The fire was already burning. They just didn't know the house was gone yet. I got home late that night, my phone buzzing nonstop. The photos of my butchered hair and my mother's cruel note had gone viral under the hashtag stronger than their scissors. I smiled. They tried to extinguish my light, but they accidentally handed me the torch. According to plan, I declined every interview. The full truth was reserved for the one place they cherished most, their fortress of illusions in the Hamptons. Sophia panicked. She actually used the same email she used for her wedding dress orders to create a burner account at @TherielSophie to attack me. It was a rookie mistake. Internet sleuths exposed her in hours, and fashion brands started dropping her contracts like flies. #Sophia exposed shot straight to the top of the trending charts. Then came the knockout blow from her fiancé, a photo of him rowing a boat alone in Maine. No diamond ring in sight. New York's elite started looking at my family with pure disgust. The ripple had become a tsunami. And while they were stumbling through the wreckage of their own lives, I offered them exactly what they needed: a peace talk. It was the only lifeline they had left to grab, and it was the perfect trap. My parents tried to play it quiet to save the wedding, but they couldn't hold out long. I knew they were desperate to gag me before the Hamptons ceremony. That's when I played my next card. 2 weeks before the big day, I reached out. I invited them to my place to reconcile and discuss my silence at the wedding. They agreed instantly, thinking they'd manipulated me one more time. That night at my apartment, I had a bottle of premium Shiraz ready. This time, the sweetness wasn't for me. I watched them pop the cork and drain their glasses with total arrogance, completely disregarding my presence. They drank until they drifted off on the sofa, stupor born from their own indulgence and their habit of looking down on the weak. Once they were completely out, I calmly pulled a pair of electric clippers from the drawer. But right before I flipped the switch, I saw my mother's old leather wallet on the table. She'd been too tired, or maybe too certain of her win, too. Put it away. In a small pocket, I found a tattered hospital bill. My grandmother, end-stage cancer. In my mother's shaky handwriting, sold the house to pay the bills. Sophia must succeed. This is our only hope. I stood there, the paper shaking in my hand. For a split second, I saw a Hertha woman carrying the weight of the entire family. But then, the image of my own shredded hair flashed back. I folded the bill, put it in my pocket, and flipped the switch. The metallic hum of the clippers sliced through the silence. I didn't shave them. Bald, that would be too easy for them to explain away. Instead, I took a deliberate zigzag lightning bolt path from my mother's forehead to the nape of her neck. Then, I did the same to my father. This was the scar of truth, a bizarre, ridiculous mark they couldn't fully hide no matter how. They styled it. I wanted them to know exactly how it felt to wake up and find your dignity stripped away by your own blind arrogance. 3 months have passed since that night in Manhattan, now standing before the mirror at the Hamptons villa. On the morning of the wedding, I watched my parents panicking, putting on elaborate hats and wrapping silk scarves to hide the marks on their heads. They don't dare cancel because of their honor. Ha! But they have no idea the real show hasn't even started. From a single phone clip, this story has become a wake-up call for an entire community. But here in the Hamptons, I won't just talk. Going to show them. As the family stood on stage during the fake applause, I stepped up. I calmly removed my mother's silk hat and my father's fedora in front of hundreds of guests. The ridiculous zigzag cuts were exposed under the bright sun, and the ballroom erupted in shocked gasps. Before they could react, I triggered the double twist. The hall's giant screens flickered to life. The security footage of them creeping into my room with kitchen shears played in high definition, accompanied by the audio of my father saying I was just a hurdle in Sophia's future. The room exploded. Sophia turned bright red and bolted from the stage. But she didn't get far. She charged back, face flushed, and snatched my phone, screaming at the crowd. She made it up. The video is a fake. The murmurs grew louder. A few guests actually started to side with her. My mother gripped Sophia's hand, her eyes pleading. I just stepped calmly back to the mic. If you think the video is fake, I have one more thing. My father's voice rang out, crystal clear. Olivia doesn't need to stand out. Sophia is the future of this family. The older daughter just needs to know her place and stay in the background. Sophia collapsed onto the floor. There were no more excuses. The final blow was silent. Sophia's fiancé didn't scream or argue. He quietly took off his ring, set it on the table, and led his mother out of the hall in absolute silence. That civilized cold exit was the death sentence for my family's high society dreams. Finally, I was seen not as a shadow, but as myself. I stood on a massive stage before hundreds of educators and psychologists at a symposium titled The Forgotten Children. The lights didn't scare me anymore. I told my story not to condemn, But to illuminate the dark corners, they can cut your hair, they can try to make you small. But they can never sever the voice inside you. I spoke with a calm, ironclad conviction. No screaming, no tears, but every word pierced the hearts of those who used to think. That's just a private family matter. After this speech, a woman approached me. She was the creative director for a global educational brand. They were launching a worldwide campaign called No More Side Characters, honoring those pushed out of the spotlight just because they didn't fit a script. Someone else wrote. She asked me to be the campaign ambassador and lead content strategist. We don't need a star, she said. We need someone who walked out of the darkness and knows how to use the truth to light up a room. I accepted. A few weeks later, I moved into an apartment overlooking the coast where the sun rises gently, and the sea breeze makes you believe everything can start over. I used my first paycheck to open a mentorship center for young women who had been emotionally abused or controlled by their families. Sarah moved in with me, serving as our creative consultant and community liaison. We weren't just two girls, sharing a cramped room in Manhattan anymore. We were two women building a space flooded with light, where no one needs permission to be seen. The building is only 3 stories, modest in size, but every room has wide windows facing the park. The walls are painted a warm cream. Subtle, elegant sign hangs on the door, and right at the oak entrance, I had a bronze inscription engraved. Here, your light belongs to you. Your value doesn't lie in the length of your hair. It lies in how fully you live your truth. On opening day, we invited everyone who had messaged me over the months. A girl from Texas came, someone who had to drop out of school so her parents could put all their money into her brother's tuition. A young woman from Arizona showed up, the one her mother called invisible, just because she didn't have her sister's glow. They brought their old wounds and left with brighter eyes. I was no longer looking for eye-for-eye revenge. The final settlement in the Hamptons was enough for me to let go. I stopped waiting for the downfall of the people who hurt me, because I realized something. True brilliance isn't winning against those who tried to silence you. It's standing firm in the very room that once broke your voice and walking through it with your story still intact. I no longer have long hair cascading down my back, but I have eyes that look straight ahead without flinching, legs that no longer tremble, and a life where I don't need anyone's permission to be me. And maybe that's the kind of light they can never cut away. The grand opening took place on a crisp, brilliant Saturday morning. The air was fresh and sharp. Sunlight poured through the thin white curtains like a gentle new breath. Sarah stood at the reception desk, guest list in hand, her eyes sparkling with pride. I stood in the corner, right behind a gold-lettered acrylic plaque that read, "Your value is not in your hair, but in the truth you dare to live." The room fell into a brief, sudden silence, as if the wind had abruptly shifted. I turned my head. My family walked in. My mother led the way, dressed in a modest cream suit, large sunglasses covering half her face. She moved slowly, as if every step was on thin ice. My father followed, silent, shoulders slightly hunched, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, avoiding all eye contact. Sophia trailed behind, the hem of her pastel dress slightly wrinkled, her heels looking unsteady. She stared at the floor, dodging everyone's gaze. The room held its breath for a beat. A few people recognized them, but no one said a word. I didn't move. I just stood there, hand resting lightly on the wooden table near the entrance. Observing them, the people who were now bowing their heads in shame before the brilliant success they once tried to extinguish. I didn't need a direct apology. I just needed them to see that I was now ahead, leading a life they could never touch again. My mother approached me first. Slowly, she took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot, but she still tried to force that gentle smile, the one she always used to smooth over moments she couldn't control. "I'm so proud of you, Olivia," she said, her voice steady but completely hollow. I smiled back, a soft, fleeting smile. Inside, I felt a vast, deep stillness that was finally out of their reach. They stood there for a beat, then quietly turned, to leave not one of them daring to write a word in the feedback box on the counter. And as the glass door swung shut behind them, I knew for the first time I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the victor, standing in my own truth. I'm proud of myself too, I replied. Because finally, I'm not anyone's shadow anymore. I didn't say it to hurt them. I said it to mark the end. My father stepped forward, his eyes darting away from the crowd, probably still haunted by the moment I yanked his hat off in front of hundreds of Hampton's guests, exposing the ridiculous zigzag path of the clippers. His voice was low, desperate. Family can always forgive each other, can't they? I turned back to the reception desk where a small wooden box sat. I rested my hand on it and looked him dead in the eye, unwavering. "Do you want to apologize?" I said, "Write it down on a feedback card." In this place, emotions aren't swept away like hair on a floor or hidden under fancy hats. A wave of silence crashed over them. Sophia turned away, looking like she wanted to melt into the walls. She hadn't been the star of any party since the security. Footage played on that big screen the moment her high society fiancé quietly took off his ring and walked out. My mother blinked rapidly. My father's lips pressed into a thin, hard line. None of them said another word. I turned my back and walked toward the main room where a group of young women was waiting for me. I didn't look back. I didn't need their validation to know who I was anymore. They stood there for a long time, but not one of the three stepped toward that wooden box. No one wrote a thing. Eventually, they left as quietly as they came. But this time, I wasn't the one left in the dust. This time, I was the one leading the way. I went back to my office after the grand opening. The room was quiet now, lit only by the soft glow of the wall lamps. I poured myself a hot ginger tea and sat in my favorite chair, facing the painting I'd hung on day one. A woman standing in a vast field. Her hair blown back by the wind, her face hidden but her posture upright, surrounded by a radiant golden halo. I thought about everything. That night, I woke up in a panic. My mother's cold voice saying, "Don't make a scene." The stage in Manhattan where I planted the seeds of doubt. And especially that day in the Hamptons where the truth stripped off their masks for good. I gave them exactly what they gave me, a total gutting of their dignity while they were drunk. On their own power, I used to think my long hair was my beauty. But it was the moment I stood up with a butchered head and a shattered heart that I truly began to shine. I want to send this message to you. Whoever is watching this right now, maybe you're sitting in a room where no one listens. Maybe you're living in a family where you're just a shadow. If you've ever been silenced by the people who are supposed to love you, remember this: they can cut your hair. They can cut the dreams you never even got to speak out loud. They can even make you drink that drugged Shiraz to strip away your pride. But they can never cut your voice unless you give them permission. Speak up. You don't have to scream. Just stand up in your own way. Sometimes it only takes one voice to help thousands of others see themselves clearly. If you've ever been treated like a shadow, leave a comment below. Share your story. Because when you write it down, you're taking your power back. And just like that, another cycle of silence is broken. We don't need to be loud to be seen. We just need to show up as exactly who we are. No apologies. No permission. Thank you for staying until the end to witness my journey. You're not alone. You never had to be anyone else to deserve love. Let your light start with your words. Sometimes I still dream about that night. The sound of the shears, the smell of that sweet, cursed wine. But I'm not afraid anymore. I've learned to live with the scar on my brow and the truth in my heart. And maybe that's the best revenge, to live brilliantly. No matter how many times they try to cut you down, if this story hit a chord in your heart, or if you're carrying your own unhealed scar, leave a comment. It's not just a message to Me, it's you reclaiming your voice. Don't let the story end. Here, hit subscribe. And turn on notifications so we can build a community where the truth is respected. And the shadows finally step into the light. Share this video with someone who needs the courage to stand firm. You're sending a ray of hope that trauma might exist. But it doesn't get to define us. And always remember, the shears may be sharp. The clippers may leave jagged zigzags. But the heart of a woman who dares to stand tall after the deepest betrayal is more brilliant and sharper than any weapon.